1. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 32 of Into the Rift. My name is Daniel Tsepha Dracos. I'm joined once again by a panel of fabulous esports personalities, starting off with none other than Steven Noogs, Nguyen, Noreen, Nguyen. We'll call you a million different things, but all it means is that we love you. You're always here. I can't get you to leave, but I love you so much, so welcome back. Joining me, additionally, from China Talk, coach of the Chiefs. Coach of China Talk, coach of the Chiefs. China, Barento, Raz Daz, as it says on the overplay. You can just call him Raz. I think is the preferred name. And last but certainly not least, I believe chief or head analyst. Sorry, I'm going to keep saying chief. Head analyst for Team 8. It's going to be Matt Shcmeider. Happy to have you here once again, Matt. Last time we had you on, I think we had more connection issues than we've ever had in a single episode. Yeah. And got a nice little 30 minutes of downtime mid-episode. This time around... This time around, it'll be a little bit easier. There was
a car accident in the powerful, man.
Whatever. We'll make it work. So today, last week we talked a little bit about KT Rolster and CJ Entis in Korea, and today we're going to be focusing on NA LCS, this split, NA so far. Kind of just NA in general. So for those of you interested in NA, you're in the right place. So just to start things off, I'm going to give you a brief look at the standings from where it is, just for those of you who come back and watch the episode. This is, of course, after Week 2 for NA, so everyone has played 4 games. Counterlogic Gaming, Gravity, Dignitas, Liquid, and Solo Mid. Top the standings tied at first place, all 3-1 records. Enemy Team and Team Impulse are both at 2-2. Cloud9 at 1-3. Team 8 at 0-4, along with Team Dragon Knights. So pretty hefty top side, and a few people who have yet to get a win. We'll have to see how that changes going into the future. But the first big game, the big game that just happened in this previous week, was CLG versus TSM. And for those of you who didn't get a chance to watch it, TSM came out on top. Some would say by the skin of their teeth, although to me it looked reasonably convincing. And I got a chance to watch the game with all the guys who are here today, and everybody had a lot to say. So let's start with Champion Select as the general topic. Looking at this pick ban phase from both CLG and TSM, what are your thoughts on what could have changed, what could have gone better, or what are the right choices here?
Who's starting us off?
Anybody. Here, Matt, go. Tell me all about it.
Right. I want to say both drafts put both teams in a decent position to win. A lot of people said it. I think a lot of the consensus was it was TSM favored, and you can see that because obviously just the amount of mid pressure is like TSM's dream condition, right? What was also interesting was that the Bard fell through, because both teams play it, and like they're both like probably the best teams that play it, I would imagine. So it was interesting to me that they didn't. CLG didn't take it for themselves. Perhaps they weren't anticipating it from TSM. Yeah, I mean, I thought it gave them good chances to win for both teams. It was quite obviously like CLG's waiting till later. TSM probably needs to make something happen through mid, as is just normal for them.
Okay, well, so here's the thing that was a big question for me is the first pick Kalista for Double If, and for first picking AD carries in general, do you feel like it's justifiable to first pick Kalista in general, and then do you think it's a good choice against TSM specifically?
I think the first pick was fine. I like the only first picking Kalista is always just because Kalista is a really strong AD carry from throughout, and it's really difficult to pin her down to begin with. And they were able. What really interested me was the fact that they were able to get Maokai and Nautilus right off of that, because that's usually one of the standard picks into Kalista. One question that I had was mostly, it feels like it might just be like insider information or just like scrim records, but like the Yasuo ban was like, okay, man, something must have came off of that. But yeah, I felt like both compositions were really solid in the sense that CLG wanted I felt like they had a stronger team fight composition. Like their outright team fights were better, and their lanes were pretty solid to begin with. But I favored TSM's overall because I felt like they didn't even have to team fight. I felt like their strength really came from just split pushing. They had the wave clear with Sivir. They had the disengage with Bard and Sivir as well, I suppose. And they could have just like used, much like Team Impulse or LMQ style, like they can just use LeBlanc to really split and see any opportunity. I felt like they had a lot more options in that sense, I suppose.
For the Yasuo ban, like Raz said, I don't think we can know unless we have inside information. But I think possibly it might be. I'm just taking a wild shot here because like what Yasuo was played in Korea, like Sunday played him, and they stomped that game. So it's always possible that Zion Spartan was like practicing in
He,
top.
yeah, I think he has quite a few games played on solo queue. You can see on Yasuo, and I'm
Mhm.
pretty sure it's just a counter to Gnar, and TSM was
Yeah.
opening up Gnar for
Yeah, he
themselves.
stomps Nar. Yeah.
So that I think that was probably it.
So, I mean, with that in mind, thinking through this pick ban phase, with the Yasuo ban, you can expect TSM to pick Gnar. Is Maokai a decent answer to that as far as a laning phase goes? If you're expecting the Gnar pick, is it reasonable to pick up Maokai here, or is Maokai way less to do with the laning phase and way more to do with the team compositionally as a whole?
I mean, Maokai may eventually give ground in that lane. It's fairly even for a while. No one should be overly pressured outside of junglers. It's just yeah, a team comp thing.
Hmm.
And then like if you want to talk about like Zion being on a more playmaking champion, well, Rumble, Rise, and Yasuo were banned, so that's probably three of his more practiced ones. So Maokai is probably the next best option for them.
Yeah. It's a solid blank pick, and especially since they've already like taken out Rumble, if they pick up Maokai, then they know fully well that the expected pick is gonna be Gnar. Um, so I thought it was fine.
Especially because like I think Nar fares better in the lane swap, like the 1v2 situation, the Maokai, because they preemptively lane swap like Sivir, Wild Turtle and Sivir were like immediately to the tier 2 tower, in which COG scouted that out and kind of sent lane like counter lane swapped. So I think that might be part of the reason.
Well, and if we, excuse me, looking at this game, if we just start and actually go into the game itself in the early game, one of the big things I noticed is obviously Pobelter is on Azir this game, and it seems like whenever you're in a region, or sorry, whenever you're in a game with Bjergsen, you're going to like really just have to put some pressure mid lane if he's on LeBlanc, or he's eventually going to kill your mid laner, right? Like, is that reasonable to say?
Yeah.
Either kill or just put so much pressure that he takes a tower and influences too much of the rest of the map.
So for
Kill or that, yeah.
Yeah, so for me, like picking basically a losing matchup into LeBlanc, not that there's really any winning matchups, but less losing matchups potentially. It seems like you just know immediately off the bat that Xmithy has to be mid, and it just feels like it puts CLG in a really bad position because they want kill pressure in other lanes, and while Sivir Bard like is admittedly like really weak in the early game, right? Outside of Sivir's ability to push the lane, like they can't really trade with Kalista Nautilus at all. It does seem to me like they don't really have an immense amount of kill pressure there either, because obviously binding is relatively easy to land, even if it's just for a slow. You have the Meep slow and spell shield. So do you think there's an issue with the Lee Sin pick here and the way that they played it, trying to put attention mid? Because for me, I just felt like Xmithy was doomed to kind of just wander near mid lane at all times, just in case.
Yeah, I mean, if they were going Azir, it doesn't quite match up. Obviously, Xmithy has a preference for that, and the other main early pressure junglers are banned. And they're not really a team. Neither of these teams seem super inclined toward Evelyn, nor would it have been necessarily been a great pick there. So, if that's his fallback, I can't blame him for that. And like if they go with something like Sedge, which is you might think is the next best option, then you're looking at giving up quite a bit of ground in the early game, which is probably something you don't want to do. But if you didn't want to give up so much ground in the early game, maybe you should have just banned LeBlanc, unless they're fearful of like really any of Bjergsen's like dominant laners. But really, I guess LeBlanc is the most threatening, and to give that away with Rek'Sai, I guess you could say was a mistake, just off the back. If anything.
Right, so out of curiosity, if they banned LeBlanc or something, who would they not ban out of Rumble, Gragas, Alistair?
That's a more difficult question.
Gragas. I think it's ridiculous to ban junglers on when you're on blue side. That's my opinion. I think
Does he
that
play Gragas?
Yeah, surely. Like,
I mean you have to like you can't be a competitive jungler without playing Gragas and Rek'Sai.
Because I know that he mostly plays like Rek'Sai, Sage, and like Lee.
I
Yeah.
mean
Like,
maybe.
I mean, maybe
think-
it's a weird preference. Maybe
Hmm.
I don't know. Like, what's weird about blue side bans right now is, like, Alistar is like one of the best picks, but you still don't want to trade badly on the other OPs, which are like Gragas Rise, Rumble is Rising, etc.
Okay.
Callista as well. So I can't
Yeah.
really speak to what they were trying to do.
Well, the other
in the
issue,
bans,
like
but-
looking at the picks and
one-
also the execute, I feel like Wild Turtle is sort of hit or miss as an AD carry. Like I really wasn't impressed with a lot of his play in the last season, but he's a very good Sivir player. So it feels weird to worry so much about Callista being in his hands in general. And also, I just feel like if you first pick Gragas and you also get Sivir, I feel like there's really no. Those picks both just feel so polarizing and so powerful to me that I don't really think that Callista would be too much of an issue. Maybe that's just me though.
For me, it comes down to pre-game planning because, like if they're gonna ban Gragas and it ends up that they feel like, hey, like that they're gonna not prioritize Rek'Sai, it just shows that they have faith in the fact that they have a larger jungle pool or one that's not gonna be so impacted. So that's understandable. Something that they did in their I don't know which game it was. I think it was. Let me quickly check again. It was the last time they played Lee Sin. Probably their first game.
Against
Oh yeah, Dignitas.
Dig, yeah.
So when they played against Dignitas, they weren't really low on CC. They had an Ashe. Ashe is not that Ashe is a perfectly fine AD carry, and it covers up for a lot of Lee Sin's issues in terms of engaging a team fight. And so, yeah, they have Nautilus and Maokai, but Nautilus's engage is it's single target. I guess maybe it's not. I'm trying to figure out how much of a factor like having Nautilus and Maokai was like an actual form of engage, but it's probably not that big of a deal. I just think Ashe would have been easier to round the comp with because hey, if you feel like you're threatened by like Team TSM picking up Callista, well, Ashe does fairly well against Callista, and Ashe does fairly well against Sivir. Like Ashe just provides a lot more in terms of that. And maybe it might not be a fair statement, but I feel like it rounds out for a lot of Lee Sin's issues in the late game.
And I think that's probably fair to say. Let's look at the game itself. So pick bans are over. These are the two teams. This is the team that you have on the side of CLG. Obviously, the same thing for the side of TSM. What do you do with this team comp? What did CLG need to change here? Because it seemed to be going reasonably well at the beginning of the game and even into the middle of the game. I feel like there's a few moments. I would say there's even one moment. There's this one team fight that CLG have in the mid game where they like get a great Azir wall disengage. They get a solid team fight. I think we were all on the call and we're like, oh look, CLG knows how to team fight. Like, yeah, good job CLG. And then immediately the next team fight after that, everything just went south.
Yeah, I mean, for the first 15 minutes of the game, CLG was probably pretty satisfied with how it was going. Like, I guess it's not great that Xmithy wasn't able to find anything early, but it's not like it was very feasible too. So by 15 minutes, they're pretty close in the game for the comps, I would say, and then it moved into the team fighting stage.
So, do we feel like this is just TSM being better at team fighting, or is this CLG just getting over aggressive, feeling too confident? I mean, what needed to happen for CLG to come out on top?
Well, okay. Well, I feel like CLG. I just think it's like coordination. They have a lot. Like their team fighting is a lot more of a. It relies on a lot more of a drawn out stage. Like it needs to be drawn out. They have Callista. They have Azir. They should be able to win out team fights if it lasts long enough. But like. Bard, I suppose. Like Lustboy just completely dominated.
Some of those Bard ults were amazing.
Yeah. And so, it's difficult to say. I guess I would probably have to like rewatch it. I forgot.
Like the simplest thing to say is that I guess CLG team fought poorly when they
Mhm.
had the tools to,
Yeah.
but I think you also can't undervalue underrate Bjergsen's impact on LeBlanc. Like,
Yeah.
not particularly known as a team fighting champion, but just like the threat it provides to the backline when it's played well. People like Bjergsen and Xiao like exert so much pressure where like other LeBlancs will struggle to like find their place after teams group a lot. They
Mhm.
still find the openings and open up the game even when like the comp like should have been more towards CLG's favor, and you see that in like Pobelter had to build like an abyssal because like he's not going to get away from LeBlanc damage and he just has to do something about it.
Mhm.
Definitely. Okay,
And
so
there wasn't even like another magic damage source on the team,
definitely a
but
tough spot.
it was still the right build.
Yeah, and definitely a tough spot to be in. I think like the worst thing that can happen to you as an NA mid laner is like, oh, it's Bjergsen, oh, it's LeBlanc. Like, so definitely not favorable circumstances, and I think defensive itemization, anything that's going to keep you alive, seems like it's always going to be the right choice because, as you said, there's just some unavoidable damage when it comes to facing LeBlanc. It's an incredibly powerful
Especially
champion.
Bjergsen's LeBlanc, yeah.
He's going to hit you with something eventually. So let's stray away from CLG versus TSM. Let's go to NA in general. Let's talk about team play in North America. Let's start with generally. Do you feel like team play in North America has been improving over the last years, or do we feel like teams are mostly retaining their identities? Because to me, it seems like TSM has always been the scrappy team fighting team, right? Like that's always the reputation that they've had, and they seem to be just doing that more. I mean, they've had a lot of different players over the years, but that seems to be what they're sticking to. CLG is the early game team. I mean, when we look at them in the past for the last couple seasons, what do we feel about like team play, team fighting, and team identity in North America?
I mean, team play is improving. I think that's like just watching the game, like kind of as a job for the past year or so. Like you see how these concepts that didn't exist a year ago, like people just start to think more and more about the game, and like early game gets more and more explored, all these different avenues, and like side wave control gets more and more advanced. Like just all these concepts pushing every kind of positional or cooldown advantage. Like it just gets tighter and tighter over time. Whether it could go faster or not is another thing, but it's definitely improving at some rate. This is just how it'll always be that way, I think, just naturally.
So which teams specifically do you feel like have improved like things like side wave control? Do you think it's all of NA that's improving steadily, or is there some teams that are doing it better than others?
I mean, the standings pretty much tell that story, or in time will tell that story. But like everyone's aware of these things, just how well they put it into practice, how well they execute it all together, like controlling a side of the vision, or like just discipline in grouping, and following out these, carrying out these concepts.
And it's also pretty important to realize that a lot of the competition, or at least the brunt of what's like of NA right now, hasn't really shown itself. For instance, like Team Dragon Knights haven't really even come together as a team.
Of course.
So there's that. And then you have Gravity, which is already doing really well, but communication will get better. I think Move as a player is a really solid player going into this. I thought he was going to be. Actually, it's really funny because I thought that he played Jarvan like 10 times better than I remember when he was in China. When he was in China. But he's always had like great jungle, like understanding of the jungle, which is something I think that ADG or EDG feature lacked and kind of needed him for. But like that's trailing off. I think that so a lot has changed, but at the same time, a lot more is like there's a lot more growth to be had in the region in terms like just naturally over the split. So I think.
Go on.
Okay, yeah. So same with Cloud9, their shot calling, etc. With Team Impulse, I feel like Team Impulse is just gonna remain the same, and that's just an opinion I hold. So that's, yeah.
Okay.
Well, if I could ask something, Raz, back to Move, since
Yeah.
you like watch him more than probably anyone here, do you think you can say anything about like why his style could be a good fit for Gravity, or like why he is seemingly already like fitting in really well.
Okay. Well, for me, he feel the presence he emitted while he was on EDG Future reminded me a lot of what St. Vicious did. Actually, a lot. St. Vicious has another feature, obviously, of like shot calling that right now Move simply cannot do. So I'm not sure how that's working out in that sense. But I think Move, as a player, he was very mid-centric. He always forced or counter-ganked around mid lane. He either ganked mid lane, counter-ganked, or he was very focused on creating jungle pressure rather than farming his jungle. And so that reminded me a lot of what St. Vicious did. So Keen would, I feel like he benefited just naturally. Um, and at the same time, just like another thing that really came out of this is that I would say he's a step up in terms of mechanics when it comes to like Lee Sin or even just, oh god, I don't even remember what he played anymore.
I mean, just
But
Jarvan
yeah,
it's the same
Jarvan,
kind of
yeah,
thing, yeah.
same shit, yeah. So that's just he pretty much he had the same style, just
Yeah, and I think I could see how it would fit well on a team like Gravity, which since being Curse Academy, I've always seen them in the kind of the same way where they were like passive to a fault back then, but
mhm,
since then they've like honed it a lot. Uh, where like the lanes do kind of sit back. Even Altec fits in that theme.
mhm,
Uh, of like sitting back in the lanes and waiting till you're strong, gathering up dragons, etc.
mhm,
And Move kind of you could say he balances that out as being
yeah,
like a Bunny too, as being like playmaking agents, obviously.
mhm.
So yeah, I can also see how he is already getting that team off to a great start,
Well,
helping do that. Yeah.
if we've looked at Move and at Gravity, and we've said Move is like kind of surprisingly a good fit right off the bat, right? Like in theory, you could craft it, but did anyone really expect it to be this effective or this early on?
I mean, I didn't really know much about Move. I did not. I just could just say I didn't expect it, but I just didn't have the. I didn't really know either way.
I don't know.
I
I didn't know
probably
much
wouldn't.
about Move, so
Yeah.
like all I know is that Kelsey and Rose thought he was good. So
Okay. So, one thing I want to talk about is with team play is how do roster swaps affect team play? And in the case of Gravity, it seems like it's working out reasonably well early on. But also when we look at like, there's obviously been a lot of roster swaps. We have Incarnation to Cloud9. We have Pobelter to CLG. We have Nian Tansa or Nian to Team 8. How do you feel like those teams have fared so far with their roster swaps? And do you think, I mean, Matt, obviously you have a little bit more inside perspective, and obviously the results tell another story too, but roster swaps have kind of been a big thing. Not so much in quantity, this split, but in importance of those players. I mean, a lot
Yeah.
of long-standing players taken off the tables here.
Yeah, I mean, we just talked about Gravity, and it was basically like, how do you balance these different actors on a team, and what their role, like not just the role, obviously the position, but their role in communication, in gameplay. Uh, so it seems like Gravity has probably done a good job with that. Uh, I'm not sure which one to go to. I guess we can just go to Teammate next. Obviously, the results, from what I've seen behind the scenes, the results have not matched it at all. But obviously, having to play Maple week 1 was a bit of a setback, not because of Maple as a player, but because obviously we wanted to get like moving forward as soon as possible. But
you have less time to practice efficiently.
yeah, like we practiced with Maple that week for a large part of that week, and Nien has definitely changed the team dynamic in a really good way, which was probably the biggest good reason that we brought him on. He's extremely vocal, like to the point where he directs a lot of the game in a very positive way, at least from what I've seen. And like our previous dynamic is obviously like top focus or soul lane focused, and Nien, the idea with Nien is we'll try to move to a more like flexible style, a reliable style, and obviously again the results haven't shown it, but they're just going to try to carry that out in coming weeks.
So, When you say he's directing the game vocally, do you mean he's shot calling in a lot of your games? And if so, is that something that the team discussed and agreed on, or is that something that's just kind of come to fruition just through playing with him?
Shot calling is pretty not ambiguous, but encompassing. So it would be wrong to say that he shot calls everything, but like different people specialize in different aspects of communication, and Nguyen seems to do a really good job at directing flow of like what our priorities are on the map.
So, out of curiosity, who has the final say, like in terms of shot calling?
Nguyen does. It was formerly Cali, but we've transitioned. We're in the process of transitioning that way. Yeah.
Okay. Definitely going to be interesting to see. Obviously, not the greatest start for Team 8, but as you said, I mean, it's a new roster. Yeah, it's a new roster. It's a young roster, and I mean, like, if you were 0-2 after week 1 with Nguyen, I wouldn't even have been remotely surprised. So I think
I find it kind of funny too, because it's usually they're both roles in which that's like the least conventional way to put like your shot calling roles. But it's
support, jungle, and mid. I think are probably support and jungle especially. So I have no problem with with AD carries or marksman shot callers. I've been impressed with people who can do it. And
the only thing I have to offer about that is like, from what I understand, I don't follow Dota a crazy amount, but from what I've like read and seen in interviews and like know offhand is like carries are often not shot callers but also game directors, like because the carries, obviously the game revolves around carries, and the team needs to know what the carries need. I suppose you could have it both ways, where the support's also like, obviously everyone has to communicate, but like I think it's important that carries on any team are like communicating what they need in terms of protection, or I need wards here, or I think our lane's gankable, etc. So it's obviously give and take from every player, but I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with an AD carry or any position shot calling.
Definitely. All right, so let's look now. Obviously, Cloud9, the other team with one of the biggest, I think, most important roster swaps, also not doing amazingly on the brackets. Looking at the new lineup with Incarnation, obviously High, formerly the shot caller, Incarnation has not taken on that responsibility, at least from what we understand. And Meteos is now the new shot caller. Looking at Cloud9, I mean, let's talk about, I guess, their win first over TSM. I mean, like, what really happened there in that game to make Cloud9 win, and then what hasn't been happening in games after that?
I think it was more so TSM just not playing well, because TSM was surprisingly unusually passive for that game.
Well, it was like a classic TSM game in that way, where like, yeah, they haven't much improved from that, but like the old TSM thing was like building a lane advantage, but then failing to like turn it into anything, and that is kind of it, plus a bunch of misplays in team fights. That is what happened in the C9 TSM game, and C9's comp also preyed on that with like the Kog'Maw obviously is can super carry late game if you let it get to that stage.
And that's basically what TSM did. They let it get there.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would like Incarnation. In that game specifically, I remember seeing like dropping CS he shouldn't have, or something like that. Like it was obviously a bad matchup, but
that game was really bad for Incarnation. He dropped I think 30 or 40 CS, and I think the bad matchup can account for like 10 to 15 of that, even 20 of that.
Yeah, I don't know the specific like numbers it could be, but I could just see that like he's suffering from nerves or jitters or something like that, which is totally excusable, I think. For like his first game, literally his first competitive game in like he was on a team before in Europe, but like obviously nothing comparable. So
not a LAN event, right?
Yeah, I give him the benefit of the doubt, but I think we should actually compare. It would be cool to compare the roster swap of Pobelter, the other one we are going to address, but comparing the Pobelter switch to the Incarnation switch, and like over the season comparing how it fares out, because they are comparable in some ways. Like they both replaced like pretty important members to the team play wise, but more importantly like team dynamic. Obviously Link and High, like in the off season, Link all of that stuff.
The Real Housewives of CLG.
The drama.
But what you get out of it is that he was an unforgettable part of their history,
Mhm.
and team dynamic. And same with High, obviously. Like High was Cloud9 in a way, not to downplay obviously the other players, but you can see like everyone knew and everyone was expecting it would be a difficult adjustment for them, and yeah, it is that way.
Mhm.
And Poe Belter being someone with more competitive experience, but less shot calling, obviously. Same boat for Incarnation. So both teams have had to compensate. CLG moving Zion, revealing Zion. Did they say he's the total shot caller or just like late game? Because
They
I imagine in the
I
same way, like Afro is
I'm
still
not
extremely
sure, but
vocal.
they
I
said
think
macro shot calling
Yeah,
is
sure.
on Zion's.
Yeah, it's kind of the same thing I said about Team 8. Or like I'm sure Afro contributes a lot still, but
Mm.
yeah. And then C9, Meteos moving more into that role. So
Yeah.
I think moving forward and even till already, it's interesting to compare those two switches and how successful the teams are with both.
Well, and I mean, so far for CLG and Cloud9, do you think the big differences in their performance is their mid laners, or do you think it's more than just that?
I think it's more than just that because, I mean, sure, Incarnation had some really, really bad lanes the last 2 weeks, but he's not like straight up beating or like he's not a huge detriment to the team compared to like maybe High. I mean, that's not to downplay what High brought to the team, but like on an individual aspect, he's even if just a small improvement, he's an improvement. I think C9's problem is more that they don't understand the meta, like they don't know what to do in like the mid game or like the early game. Um, for
Yeah, it's a bit.
CLG, oh, sorry. Just
I mean, oh, sorry. You
I
go.
Go,
was gonna
Matt,
say
go.
like, yeah, go.
I was just gonna say the C9 like record is. I want to say it's a bit skewed because we'll talk about the C9 dig game later. But like, you couldn't call any game really a fluke, but that was the closest one to a fluke. Like, okay, that
Mhm.
sounds really bad because dig did a really good job.
Yeah.
But like, I also want to say, okay, there's no way to say this without sounding like a trashing on dig. But
Go
I
for it.
really respect dig. I really respect Cloud9. But like Cloud9 could have avoided a lot of the bad things in that game is the main thing.
And to be fair, I think like Dig has not necessarily earned the benefit of the doubt yet. They quite frankly sucked last season, so I think it's
Yeah.
fair to assume that it's Cloud9 dropping the ball more than it is Dig playing well. Even if Dig did play pretty well, I think Zingy had some pretty amazing map pressure, and we'll get more into that game in a second. But I understand the conflict there because it's like you don't want to take away from Dig, but at the same time, I mean, Dig definitely went through a rough patch last season, and they could have turned it around a little bit, but at the same time, it could just be Cloud9 underperforming. Nugan, you were gonna say something else?
Sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna like move on to the CLG part. Like, I think like obviously Paul Butcher I think is a huge upgrade to Link, but at the same time I don't think him replacing Link was as big as Incarnation replacing High Dynamic was. Like that was such a bigger change, I think.
Right.
Well,
Because
and if
This was C9's first roster change. They've
ever,
never had to
yeah.
deal with that. Like pre LCS, they've never had to deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
No, and I would definitely agree. And also, you know, as Matt mentioned earlier, we had all that drama with CLG, and CLG's gone through like a lot of roster swaps, right? I mean, we've seen so many different renditions of the CLG lineup, so many different top laners, so many different junglers.
Yeah. What you could say that's different about it is that C9 is obviously like Negan just said, but CLG, their changes are never so drastic that it completely just like changes the team dynamic. It's always iterative and small,
Mhm.
and like, that somehow you managed to have the completely different roster from like whatever a year ago, except double lift.
And
Not
Afro.
not to knock on it. It's just that that's the difference.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're not totally comparable.
I would feel like okay, this is gonna be weird. The difference between C9 and CLG in this sense is that even though like you can, it's very, it's very easy to look at Cloud9's changes and say that it's positive, or not even so much positive as it is very obvious that you see what you're getting and what you see what you're losing in that sense. Like for
Mhm.
instance, you're losing a lot more vision control. You're losing a lot more, I guess, the shot calling
Selfless
aspect. Or,
play, yeah.
exactly right. But when it comes to CLG, I feel like the loss and the gain in that aspect is a lot more hidden. With CLG, the gain that you get obviously is mechanics. Like everybody, I don't want to shit on them, but it just I feel like you look at the gain you like the mechanical gain you get out of it. It's quite like comparable to Cloud9 in that sense. But what you lose, okay, with Cloud9, at least when you lose the shot calling aspect from high, like you have Meteos, Chime, Elimination, like they've already proven themselves, or at least like, that's what we've heard of, right?
Hmm.
But with CLG, now that we're hearing that, of course, it's going to be moving on to like Afromu's already like been. I think Afromu, like from what we've heard of, like Afromu shot calling is fine, it's solid. But Zion Spartan, I've never been convinced with him. Like I've actually never been convinced with Zion
Yeah,
shot
I've never
calling.
been convinced with him even as a player too. Yeah,
Hmm.
but he's improving for sure.
Yeah. And so I feel like having this burden on him is actually really good for him in the long run. I'm not sure how this will work for this season, like for in the regular season for him making these calls, because when you go back to how the dynamics work with, I forget what did GGU rename to Coast, yeah, how it was in Coast. I feel like a lot of their mid to late game decision making, or at least it's always been really hectic, really, I guess, exciting for a lot of the audience, but like it's just one of those situations where it's like, oh, you shouldn't make that decision, but
Yeah,
I just but I guess it's just learning issues, I guess,
Hmm.
learning situations.
I think another interesting that to pay attention to between C9 and COG going forward in the season is that okay? Like we've seen this from COG before. Like I'm not saying I don't have faith in them. Like I'm saying impartial
No, I
this
don't have faith.
as
No, that's
impartial as
fair.
I
Say
can,
it.
right?
Say it. Good. Because if you don't, I will.
CLG's roster changes are always short-term success, long-term failure. And I'm not saying that this is definitely going to be a long-term failure. I mean, I don't know. I can't know. But compare that to what we don't know about C9. They've only declined, and then even with high, they still hit second place in NA last split. So is I guess we can pay attention to whether or not seeing the pole belter move actually change anything in the long run, and whether or not the incarnation move will improve in the long run, because that's the real goal, right?
yeah,
You want to be
Mhm.
better in the long run. You want to be better by the time regionals, the finals, the bracket stage comes around, so you can go to worlds.
yeah.
And this is only week 2, so
If yeah, and like if we remember, like I want is my memory correct that like last split C9 also started like pretty bad, maybe 0-2
Yeah,
and 1
they
and
they
did.
3,
started pretty bad
like
early on. Yeah,
actually equally bad, and people like the same conversation, literally the
Yeah.
same conversation. CLG
yeah.
was probably doing well too at the time.
No,
So,
definitely. Yeah.
like from a historical standpoint, like literally nothing is different,
Mhm.
and you might like I'm always one to like favor history over anything else. Like anyone can see, oh, sure, C9 will pick it up at the end and CLG will collapse. Like, I'm the first one to look at history, but that being said, like C9 has declined every time, as you said, Nugan. I've never been, uh, I've always, okay, I said I've always been a fan of history, following history, but this is the first split where I think CLG is gonna overtake C9,
Mhm.
and CLG could win the split or get second and go to Worlds.
Okay.
Mhm.
Is my view, and
Oh,
like we've
careful, man.
obviously, I
Don't.
guess the transition. I'm sorry if I've jinxed your team, but
No, I just.
obviously the easy thing to transition to from there is like what we've ignored to this point, just because we haven't gotten to it, is
Yeah.
the coaching on CLG, which is probably the more important change than Poe Belter, right? And like
Definitely.
maybe it's not even Poe Belter, even though he's a good player, and it's like what the change represents that they made the change, and
Mhm.
maybe Link was like a vestige that needed to be removed, or like that. That was pretty harsh, but uh,
Very
like
colorful.
it needed to
Honestly.
move on, and the coaching change maybe was the more important thing, and that's the main factor in why I think CLG would, if CLG would have success this split, I would attribute it to that
Mhm.
more than anything else.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about support staff then. Let's talk about. I mean, Cloud9 has had Charlie for a very long time, and I don't know much about their support staff outside of that. And obviously, CLG has picked up this new coach. Did everyone here get a chance to watch the interview that he did with Travis?
Yeah, I did.
I haven't.
Yes.
So obviously his whole thing is just very much about enforcing practice schedules, keeping the players on track. And from what he said, and this could just be his PR thing, like he's not going to reveal any of the negative aspects of the team, who knows. But he says that like he hasn't even seen with this new CLG lineup like any of the issues that were present before. So I mean, from that alone, I think it might be safe to attribute that like Link, for whatever reason, was bringing down the emotional relationships on the team.
Not even the
I
emotional
don't
relationship on the team, but like the public perception of the team.
Oh,
Honestly, it in retrospect, it almost
Oh
seems
right.
that way. That like, wow, CLG, it was horrible, but maybe perhaps it was just like all overblown, and this is why their new coach is like, well, obviously he has an incentive to say it's not bad. He's not gonna say it's bad, but I'm inclined to I want to believe him. So,
Mm.
well, I think the whole thing isn't necessarily that Link brings down the whole team, right?
yeah,
Isn't it more just that things get worse and then they don't get patched up? Like
yeah.
that was the whole problem with CLG. Like when something goes wrong, it never gets fixed.
But you can
Like I
So
don't
you
I
can
don't
get rid
think
of a
any
player and
reason
bring in a new player, and that's like fixing the problem, right?
Like I don't think any reasonable person thinks Link single-handedly brought down the team.
yeah,
It's just like
mm.
this the public post thing just
I know. Like
threw a
what I
lot of
mean is like
perception. Yeah, I know
I
Yeah.
you're
don't
not saying
think the
that.
coach needs to say whether or not things are bad here or there, because I think
What else
the
is a
more
coach gonna
important
say?
thing is that
Mm.
he's actively working so that it never like goes
Yeah,
unaddressed. That's
yeah.
it.
The
That's
past
simple.
doesn't matter
Yeah,
to him.
exactly. You fix like you don't let it like sit in the water. That's it.
Yeah.
And then if yeah, that's pretty much it. Like in his
Like
interview, that's what I got the sense of. He doesn't let things sit in the water. That's fine.
So do you think we've seen notable improvements in CLG's team play outside of just their interpersonal interactions in the first 2 weeks, or do you think that's something that we will see moving forward now that they have a more rigorous support staff, or a more strict support staff, and a more rigorous schedule structure?
it's not quite as obvious yet that their play is like drastically improved. Like it's a pretty good start. Lost to TSM kind of unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I don't. What we can say is that, well, we're not hoping for, if you're on the CLG train, you're not hoping for short-term success. And like if you were seeing drastic improvement, it might even be misleading, because if you were making systemic changes to how the team approaches practice and team uh, mentality, it probably wouldn't yield results immediately, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
It
And it's
actually.
also go on.
I just wanted to say it actually reminds me a lot, and I keep going back to another region, but I like it. Like the CLG dynamic and what it brings reminds me a lot of Vici Gaming in that sense, and what the role of each player and how they play around it. Because like for the longest time, I feel like CLG, how they played around their issues in terms of team fighting, in terms of I guess the mechanical skills that comes around their team play. They just like out rotate you. They play around the map a lot better.
They play
Uh,
faster than any other team too,
Mhm.
which
exactly.
is something I'm like, now that I come to think of it, I
Mm,
admire more than
mm,
anything else. Like of teams that aren't named C9 or TSM, there's like, obviously you could look at the game in the dichotomy of like scaling and then mid game,
mm,
like winning two different ways. That's like narrowing it down a lot, but if you want to really boil it down, you could do that, say that, and like if gravity is like like a scaling focus, CLG is a mid game focus, and I've
mm.
always been more of a fan of mid game, coming from Team 8, which in Challenger at least was definitely more mid game team, and even in LCS we were more like, we won more through mid game, right? So
Yeah.
uh, I always like to see like the quick games, the concise,
The
clean
cleaner.
games
Yeah.
that
Exactly.
are execute like the smallest early advantage, and you turn it into tower after tower. You don't care about dragons anymore if you're a mid game team, but yeah, tower
Hmm.
after tower, kill after kill, no mistakes.
Mhm.
I think CLG does have a shorter average game time.
They
I'm pretty
do.
sure of
They
that.
do.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I think like just in general, the thing to take it with a grain of salt, because like me and Matt pretty much said it, like history does not favor CLG.
Mhm.
So like it's just you just have to show us that you've changed for the better. That's pretty much it. Like you can analyze it as much as you want, but like either you're right and then they've actually made the change, or you're wrong and it's like CLG's just like fucked up again.
But I feel like that's the thing. So it goes
It's
back to
hard though,
like
yeah.
the Vici Gaming example that I used. All of the outward changes that they've made in terms of like I guess their shot calling and their team fighting. Like I mean, there's like the players that they've changed. Like of course, obviously Link. That's the only change, the player they've changed. It doesn't mean as much. It's actually just like the smallest pebble compared to the fact that they're actually making infrastructural changes. Like
So who's the
that's what.
Heatong of the CLG?
Link, hopefully not Pobelter. Pobelter proved himself to be Hitong when he was playing with Winter Fox, but you know, it's like
What were the structural changes to Vici? Because I'm actually not aware of that.
no, I just mean
Maybe
like
that's
that.
off topic, but
That's like no, I felt like
oh, you just mean
that they
dynamic.
haven't, yeah, like they
Oh,
haven't made
okay,
those
yeah.
changes. Hopefully they
Okay.
will, but that's just like
Now I understand that. Okay.
yeah.
So who's the Vasily of CLG?
I mean, in personality, double F. Let's be real. But
Not even in personality, just in playstyle as well. It's just always getting caught because he's in the wrong position, but that's just another thing. That's just
Let's
funny.
hope they don't have to. They don't have to pull a dandy and move Zion. Zion needs to run away, so they move
Oh my
Nick
God.
Smithy to the top lane.
oh my God, Xmithy top lane, please God no.
I'm ready.
He's already played AD carry, so I think he's pretty good at other roles, right?
Right?
Oh my
XDG,
God,
Xmithy.
Yeah.
the
I
memory
mean,
point.
that's true. Well, I mean, if Callie ever has to go back to school, you can just swap Nguyen back to the top lane, right?
Exactly.
There we
That's the
go.
plan, actually.
There you go.
I don't even know if I could take you seriously.
That's why Matt's so good.
Did I just ruin the credibility of everything I said on this show?
Potentially, yes.
That's the thing. Whenever me and Raz are in a call with Matt, everything he says, you can't tell if he's talking seriously or like, if he's being sarcastic.
Oh, that's great. That's
That's
what
the
I'm.
best.
That's
Literally,
exactly.
that's
It's perfect. Well, okay, so we've looked at Cloud9 as far as role swaps. Not so much as support staff because I think a lot of that information just isn't available as far as how their support staff and structure goes. But let's talk about Team 8 briefly. Obviously,
Yeah.
you've moved on to just focusing on analysis now, Matt, and a history teacher is now the head coach. So how is that affected? What does history do for the team as far as from a coaching perspective go? What has he helped with? And now that you are solely focusing on analysis, do you feel like it's improved the support staff structure?
Well, I suppose I should clarify everything a bit. But forgive me if the first thing I'm going to mention here is CLG. I think the situation between both
We're
our
forgiven.
teams is kind of like kind of similar, and I think both me and Skara both kind of felt the same way after the split about like things not being done the way they should, and both kind of like did the same thing. Like Skara like just left the post, and I also thought that there should have been a different coach that could enforce better, basically. So that happened, and I think in the long run, both teams will be better off for it, definitely. So again, it's going to be slow, and no one's expecting immediate results with the change to AD carry and coach. But yeah, similar to CLG's new coach, I think history teacher does a great job, better job than me, of course, than like enforcing like schedule and like actually just talking to the players straight up, not afraid to be the bad guy.
Are you
Like,
just saying that
that's
because he's sitting
exactly-
behind you?
Yes, indeed. No, but like seriously, like
Mhm.
the only thing I could ask is that I would not feel bad about like transitioning out, and like that I like left the team in a bad place or something. But like even though the results don't show it yet, I think I'm really happy with our staff.
Mhm.
Okay. So, like a lot of these kind of staff, these kind of big changes, you feel like it's slow and steady.
It's just really weird to say it when like our staff is just sitting next to me and behind me.
give him a shout out. Shout out to
As
history
soon as,
teacher.
as soon as you end your speech, you just like suddenly there's like an applause in the background.
History teacher just like turns around like, "What'd you say?
What'd you say?
Get off the show!"
I'm pretty sure there's a gun embedded in the back of history teacher's chair, pointing right at Matt.
Yeah.
In the event
No,
that no longer satisfied with his work. That's fair. That seems reasonable.
And then like my job like I don't really do too much different besides like observing the scrims that I do observe and like talking to players offhand once in a while, and like I guess analyst role is the best way you could put it. But with our revealing too much with other things, I'm probably just gonna be going back to school in the fall after the split. So like I'll be helping teammate for like the split or whatever. But
Okay.
I hope to eventually like leave the team, like obviously on good terms, but also in a good place for them. Yeah.
All right. Well, I would be sad to see you go, but I hope that you can find a way to get teammate in a good place, and I look
Going
forward
full retirement, full Hugo.
to full Hugo. I mean, to be fair, if you go full Hugo, you'll be back to teammate in like 3 months after you say you're done.
Oh, go
What the?
He knows it. He'll probably watch this. He know you know it, Hugo.
I can't make any
Okay.
jokes.
You're in
that
chat
would
right
be
now?
Insensitive.
Let's move on.
You know.
Let's move on.
All right. Okay. So I want to close out. We're at about at an hour, and we're trying to keep down, for those of you who missed our last episode, we're trying to keep it at an hour as far as shows go, so that it's easier for you as viewers to watch, and it's easier for us to produce and provide quality content without rambling. So I want to close out today with NA as a region and an overall perspective. First off, is NA improving?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of addressed this before, but I guess we can go back into it more in depth, like I said about
Side wave control and...
I mean, that was just an example. Like that's like when people always say there's like these buzzwords, like that's one of them, or like
power spikes.
but like that's a negative. Yeah, power spike advantages, invisible pressure. What are some other ones?
Objective control.
Yeah, objective control, and like back like the Monte Cristo, like obviously were the first ones with like rotations, etc. And like people like make jokes out of them, obviously, but that's to downplay the wait, they're actually like auto spacing, like that's to downplay like
Yeah.
Monte Cristo, whatever he is as an analyst. You have to admit that he introduced these concepts into the mainstream, and like anyone who introduced these concepts, like that's the game advancing, and you see like as teams start to incorporate them, that's the progression.
Ciber comps.
Ciber comps, yeah. How hard is that though?
Oh my god. All right, so on an international scale, how do you expect us to fare at Worlds this year?
NA's better than
I don't think we'll do well.
Oh, we're
honestly.
fucked.
I think we're fucked until we learn how to actually scout and adjust to other teams. Like, okay, like I guess you can use the argument that like NA teams adjust to other NA teams, but that's because they scrim all the time. Like, the teams that do really well on the world stage are two types, in my opinion, like two types. The people who three types maybe. The people who are just like so good that you stomp the competition, like SKT or something, right?
And as
Like
time moves
AG or
on,
something.
those teams are that like the skill differential that won't happen as much, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
Or B, the teams that do adjust really well to like other teams how they play, or C, the team that cheeses everyone. Like NA is none of those. Like we're not any of those three, so I don't think
Okay.
we do well on the international stage.
So I guess to go back to the original question, like, is NA improving? Yes, but is NA improving at a rate that is good relative to other regions? That is more up for debate, obviously. And,
So
like,
yeah, we in our own little vacuum are improving, but are we going to be comparable to China
Right.
or Korea anytime soon? I guess is
And,
the
like-
big thing that we want.
like I have to admit, I'm the biggest like NA fanboy. Like, want to believe in NA talent, or not just NA talent, but NA teams. More
Well, I
so
did-
teams than talent, but
Before
uh,
Nguyen cut you off, I heard you say that NA is greater than EU.
I mean, on the whole, I still want to say, like, team play wise, like, Fnatic and Origin look like really good. I have to, like, that's true. Like, Fnatic showed they're a world class team at NSI. But I want to say that I want to believe that on the whole, NA is just better strategically.
Mhm.
Just from offhand watching you, but like maybe I'm just too far jaded of like years and years of the debate and the memes of NA sucks at mechanics, or EU is just makes stupid team decisions.
Mhm.
So maybe I'm just too embroiled in the history to make a clear judgment of it. And I must say that I also don't watch EU a crazy amount.
Mhm.
You'd have to ask someone else to get a better judgment of that.
Something that I've always come to the same realization in the sense that I feel like just I wouldn't say every split, but last two splits. I think this includes summer, of course. Every time CLG has left the regular season, I've always come in with an I wouldn't say expectation, but belief that I feel like they could actually not challenge, but dent like an international event. And every time they've gone to an international event, they've always either come in with a completely new lineup that's completely either fucked up or like whatever, or they, yeah, that's it actually, or they were just simply bad like in season two. You either have one or the other. In this sense, the reason why I've held on to this feeling is simply because they're a team that has understood rotational play, not even just, they've understood map play the best in the scene. And uh that is a concept, or at least like other regions, or at least a good portion of teams find hard to execute. And of course, if you have good map play, especially in this meta, ever since they made tower changes, etc., you have to have decent team fighting. Not even so much team fighting, you have to be able to play well around it. And so, and I guess have a strong enough mentality to go into playoffs and be able to like not tank and not pick horrible comps, but like that's whatever. I feel like so that's something that I've always lost on. But I think if a team like CLG or goes to Worlds, I think they would be fine. I wouldn't. I think, and by saying fine, I think they'd be better than EU, and I think they would challenge some Korean teams, like depending like third place, the second place, fine maybe. That would probably would be like that's where it ends. That would be where I think. If TSM were to go, I think they'd need significant changes in their early game. But I think I think TSM's a great team fighting team. If they ever find a way to like magically get into the mid game or late game against like I guess a Korean team or a Chinese team, they'd be okay. But they need to get to that point first. Like,
I think a big thing. I don't know how true it holds this season with like Fnatic and Origin being the top teams in EU. But like something I've always heard and kind of like understood to a pretty good extent is like a lot of teams say that EU teams are hard to prep for because like specifically Fnatic, and like I think the reason why is because like Korea, China, like Korea goes to Worlds like international and they play their own style like so well. China does that too, and so does EU. Like they have very distinct play styles when you look at like the general um traits across the team across the board. And then you go to NA, and then I don't really think NA is like distinct, right? Like they try like TSM, they're a really good team fighting, so you're basically trying to be better at team fighting than like China or something. It's like that's you can't play them at their own game if you're worse than at it than them. Like if you know, like I don't know if that makes sense,
mm,
but then like so like because of that, if like Fnatic is so distinctly hard to prepare for unless you play against them so much often, or Origin, or even like CLG EU way back then, like yeah, like you know they were just late game, but like it was kind of hard to play against unless you play against them all the time. Same with Moscow 5. NA never really had that. So that's why I think like for one reason we default to not doing well against other opponents because like they don't have to do much to dismantle NA teams. Other
So
than
yeah.
I was just gonna say other than like scouting boarding patterns or band pick patterns stuff like that. That's easy.
Anyone can do that, yeah. So
mhm.
you're saying basically NA's lack of identity is their downfall. I think that's
Yeah.
pretty fair.
That's a fair assessment. I think that another thing that really it's always hard to assess when it comes to European teams, and I've fallen that same idea in that oh well, NA teams are better because strategically we are
We're
more
smarter people,
advanced.
right?
Yeah, of course. But a big issue is that I've always realized, or at least for now I've realized, what the fuck, is that they are their mentality is so much better in like tough situations, so much better. And when I say them, I mean like Fnatic, I mean Unicorns of Love. They don't give a damn, and it's not that they don't care. Is that if they see a play that they can possibly make, they will go for it.
Mhm.
Like they don't put like borders. They don't hide behind certain. I would say excuses, or even just kind of like set walls for them in expectations. Like for instance, if they're going up against, oh my god, that's either I'm just gonna play on to like a very basic. It's probably gonna play like oh my god, I'm going up against Faker. Or, oh my god, I'm going up against Marin or something. Or oh, we're going up against SKT. Already, right then and there, when you are going up against those teams, those walls are set up simply because of how you rate yourself. I think that's almost unavoidable. But when you see how Fnatic plays, or even when you see how Unicorns of Love play against other European teams in the playoffs that no one expected them to beat, they play extremely aggressively. They don't exactly put those walls up. They don't put those walls up for themselves. They don't have any mental cobwebs.
That's actually what I agree with a lot. Like, Unicorns has no fear.
Mhm.
Like, the smallest side about Unicorns is like they're like the only and the best team ever in the West at like playing their own, what they want with a reason and doing it and
Yeah.
being successful, and that's really admirable.
Mhm.
I guess you could say Gravity is similar in NA, but Unicorns is the best, most successful.
How do you think we change that?
I don't know how, like, I don't think it would be easy, but like you just have to like change the mentality. Like if you see the opening, you have to like try and go for it, right? I mean, that's why I was complaining about the TSM C9 game, because it's like I do think there was a lot of opportunities for TSM to engage or something, but they just didn't do it. And they do that in a lot of their games. Sometimes they wait for the lead to build up. I think that's just like you have to go for it. You have to make those games like okay. I say it like you have to make those games shorter. That like maybe for me, because I don't want to sit there for 40 minutes when you have an 18k gold lead and do nothing. But like you're gonna win more games when you're more decisive. At least that's what I think. So.
Yeah, and in a lot of ways, the way of changing that is rosters. Like it's like determined by the rosters itself. Like for instance, with Fnatic, you have Rainover and Huni, and if you listen into any of those like all chats, I don't know what they're called. I think they're called all
It's
chats.
called all
Mic
chat.
check, all chat,
Mic check.
etc.
It
Mic
used to
check,
be
there
all.
we go.
Last year it was all chat. This year it's mic
Yeah.
check.
So if you listen to any of the mic check, what do you hear? You hear Rainover saying, "Oh, we can do it, guys!" Yeah, and just always like I feel like he is just like half cheerleader in the background. He's always like, well, if they lose some horrible fight, if they go like 5-0 in a fight, he's like get completely wiped out. It's like, oh, don't worry, guys. It's like he's always the positive note. They always feel like they can continue to win these fights. It seems like the presence that he has on his team is so it's invisible in that sense, but it's very vital to have. Same goes for Huni. Huni just like does whatever he like. He just goes. He's just like he's a playmaking aspect on his own. But then you look at NA, and you have it's not even just an NA and EU thing. You have a lot of that in EU. Like you have the Forgivens, etc. But like in NA, you have like players like Dyrus and everybody. That's like the easiest target to go after. That's by far the easiest is to say, oh, Dyrus, because everyone wants to shit on Dyrus.
My question is like, who are the emotional cores on the top NA teams? I guess is like that. I guess that is part of what you're saying,
Exactly.
and it's hard to point that out on like TSM or C9 without High. I mean, without knowing too much about them exactly, but yeah.
Yeah, and it's so vital to have because I know with working on my team with the Chiefs, like Spooks, our jungler, is an extremely vital emotional aspect of that team because he's always making plans. If he's even if he's like really far behind, he doesn't like the aspect of tilting does not exist for him. If he's behind, he tries to overcompensate with like, yeah, of course, like making plans, etc. Like always like boosting people up. You know, oh, this game's not over, etc. Or he just like he goes full holo kind of like Huni thing. So it's funny sometimes. It's whatever.
I'm glad we were able to get OPL into the conversation. This NA show.
Yeah.
I think we got
And
everything.
EU and a large EU detour.
I apologize. in
No, EU.
advance
It's important to understand because I think it's good to have.
No, yeah. I'm half joking, but like it's important. Like it's hard to see a region without comparing it to other regions. Obviously, I just regret that we weren't able to bring in LMS or CNB
Oh
or
my
the,
God.
whatever the heck the Turkish league is called.
I love how you said CNB. That specific
Wait,
Brazilian
is that what it's
team.
called?
No, it's CBLOL.
Oh fuck.
Yeah,
Brazil,
CNB is literally just a team in Brazil, and I was like,
My
that
favorite
team.
team match. It's
That
actually my
that,
favorite
that shows you
team.
how much I know. I'm sorry.
There you go. But I will say, I think it's good to keep international perspective. It's
Yeah, you
important
can
to see.
only see things in relation to other things. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
you can't just if we were just looking at NA in a vacuum, you'd look like me being like, yes, NA is improving, and that's it.
And it's getting
Buzzwords,
better.
etc.
Because the best in NA is better than it was last year. Got it. Well, still good to look forward to. We'll have to see what NA does. Obviously, this is only the first 2 weeks. Is there any other last little tidbits any of you gentlemen would like to add?
We didn't talk about Dig versus C9, and I know we don't have to go super in depth into it, but
We kind of talked about it.
we
Yeah.
touched briefly. I said watch that stuff so you had something to reference, not so that we could talk about
okay.
it.
Well, is it? All I only say is like Zingy's kind of like Zingy's play is so weird and sometimes bad, but sometimes he's a genius, and like you have to like respect a Zingy like
Yeah,
Do you
the
think he's
Zingy
there?
Zach is good.
on Zack or in his early, like all you have to do against, well, oversimplifying is like all you have to do against Dig is deny the early pressure, don't give up ground early game,
Yeah.
but teams still do that against them. So it's to their credit that Dig finds a way to do it.
Yeah.
For
And
sure.
it would be cool to see them continue to do well.
All right. Well, this has been it for episode 32 of Into the Rift. We'll be back next week. Probably a little bit less about NA. Probably a little bit more about another region when we revisit NA. We'll have to see if people are banning Zach against a Zingy or doing something else. Before we close out 100%, let's get some shout-outs going. And let's start with you, Matt. I think you've got the most.
Shout out to teammate, and shout outs to Dig and every NA team. Shout out to NA.
Shout out to NA.
Shout out to my friends.
Is he looking at? I see. I feel
Are
like
you looking at
gun
an American flag?
Yes.
Looking off into the
salute.
distance.
Yeah. Shout out to America, Canada, Mexico. Yeah, that's it.
Azerbaijan.
No, that's not
Mongolia.
NA.
All right. All right. All right. All right, Raz, shout-outs. Let's do it.
All right. Shout out to the Chiefs. Good old Australia. Shout out to Canada and the Queen. Nothing else. I think that's fine.
Nougat? Can you top that?
I don't really know if I can top that, so I'm not gonna try.
Who's the leader of Vietnam?
Oh my God! Get out of here, Raz.
All right.
All right. I'll just.
Thank you to Daniel for hosting the show. Thanks into
Oh, it's-
Shout out to Dan for hosting. Shout out to Emily for not killing me for us briefly mentioning Brazil without her around.
Yeah, I'm actually very sorry about that.
It's okay. It's okay. It's okay to be okay. Whatever. All right. CNB law mistakes aside.
No.
Thank you, all of you, so much for coming out to the show. Thank you to all the viewers who are watching this. We'll be back next week at the same time, Tuesday at 4:30 Pacific Standard Time, 7:30 if you're on the East Coast. If you're in EU, I'll figure out what time that is. I don't actually know, but we'll make it happen. If you don't get a chance to catch it live, you can always catch it on YouTube and follow us at ITR Esports for any updates on the shows, panelists, etc. And of course, as you can see on the overlay on your screen, both the names and the Twitter handles of everyone who's on the show. Make sure you give them a follow and a shout out if you like what they had to contribute. And of course, we'll see you next time.